Okay, so today's webinar's title is Climate Data in Action, an interactive workshop for public health. So as mentioned, my name's Ryan and joining me is Elaine from the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. I'm going to open things up today, give us a little overview of what it is we do, why we're here, and what we're hoping you will get out of this today before I pass it on to my colleague Elaine to go through what you're really here for, a tour, an in-depth tour of our latest and greatest tools and data sets that we think are going to be instrumental for your work in health. So, I mean, Elaine, we were already introduced, but maybe you can pop on the screen and just give a wave so everyone can see you. So for me, I'm joining you from Winnipeg today. It's my home office here. This is kind of what I do for a living. I give talks to groups just like you. As I mentioned, I've been a part of a webinar through the NCCEH already. I have a huge passion for outdoor activities and climate science, and I've been doing this for about 20 years or so. You want to give a little hello there, Elaine?
Yeah, hi, I'm Elaine. I've been in climate science for the whole of my career. I'm in Regina in Saskatchewan, and yeah, just enjoy actually interacting with audiences for ClimateData.ca, learning how we can serve climate information to make it as useful and usable for you as possible.
All right, so quick outline, what to expect for today. I'm just going to take 5 minutes and sort of go through the basics, make sure we're all on the same page, and explain, how it is we've come to be together today. I also want to take just a few minutes and recap part one of this webinar, which, as I mentioned, took place last February. I'll hand it over to Elaine. She'll take about half an hour to go through a nice in-depth live tour of ClimateData.ca, and that's really cool. So if you've got a separate screen and you want to bring up a web browser, follow along, that's going to be awesome. Because right after that, we're going to be going into this breakout group activity thing. And you'll want to have, paid attention during Elaine's tour because it's going to be important for knowing how to do that activity. Then we'll all come back together, hopefully have learned a thing or two and have a chance for some questions at the end. So it's an hour and a half in total, which is lots of time, but I think it's going to fly by. So let's get to it. So a quick introduction. So Elaine and I both work for the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, and I'll explain a little bit more about that organization in a second. But really, let's just make sure we're all on the same page and have some context for what's happening right now. Look at this graph. These are the global temperatures relative to a pre-industrial period. Last year, for the first time, the globe surpassed 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is incredible. And when we look at the last 30, 40 years of data, we can see that that trend is persistent and consistent, and it is driven by human activities, greenhouse gas emissions, land use changes, and that sort of thing. And this trend is certainly not slowing down, and we do expect 2025 to fall somewhere within that black bar, close to the record-breaking year we saw last year, if not exceeding it. Wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world, but we'll see. And where do we go from here? Well, only up, really. The future is not known. We climate models, which we're going to be talking a lot about today, are not crystal balls. They do not tell us what the future is going to be like. We have to come to climate models with scenarios, likely outcomes of the future. How might society develop? How might industrialization and population and education patterns change in the future? And how might those affect climate? So today, Elaine is going to show a number of climate maps, and those are all going to fall into one of these various SSPs, shared socioeconomic pathways or scenarios of the future. We've got in blue SSP1. This is the most utopic, everyone comes together and we achieve all our sustainable development goals. We keep population in check and we move towards a brighter, greener future. And even if we do that, we can see that global warming values still reach very close to 2 degrees of warming before petering out near the end of the century down here. Or perhaps the opposite happens. We follow a pathway more like SSP5 in red. This would be a scenario that would involve an aggressive amount of industrialization, and it's certainly not something that can be discounted. But it's a lot of global change, in excess of 4 degrees by the end of this century. So we're going to be showing these off today, and it's important, therefore, to keep these SSPs in mind because it represents the largest source of uncertainty when it comes to understanding future climate changes. But what does this all mean? It's easy to talk about degrees of global climate change, and what that means in context is sometimes hard to understand. So let's just look at a few examples. So I think we're all largely familiar with the 2021 heat dome event in BC. This was a significant event. Nearly 12,000 911 calls where people were overheating in their homes. First responders were dealing with heat stress issues on the job. This was an event that was termed to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 1 in 1,000 year event. Extremely unlikely. Um, in a world where global temperatures are 2 degrees above the pre-industrial period, so again, we're at or very nearly at surpassing 1.5 degrees. So 2 degrees isn't that far away. This type of an event could occur every 5 to 10 years. So it really puts it into perspective of how significant change we are talking about, and in not a too long of a time period. Okay, how about another example? Wildfires. I mean, the 2023 wildfire season really stands out, with the most area burned in Canada's recorded history. But 2025 is the second most damaging year on record. And all of this is being driven by warmer temperatures. And in fact, wildfires have been linked to human-caused climate change. There is certainty around that. And so, when we think about exposure to wildfire, smoke, evacuations, and all the health impacts that follow with that, this is another very significant, very concerning trend that we all need to be aware of. Or how about one more example, flooding? We look at another event out of BC, this atmospheric river event from 2021. This event caused widespread flooding, large damage to infrastructure, which cut off communities, raised food security issues, water supply issues, and that sort of thing. It was a very significant event that had a very large health impact. This event was found to be made 2 to 4 times more likely as a result of climate change to date, and in a future of 3 degrees of warming relative to the pre-industrial period. This type of atmospheric river event will roughly double in its occurrence in likelihood. So, these different events, and these are just 3 examples, hopefully help sort of frame, again, the significance of the type of changes that we are talking about. And hopefully your ears are perking up for, wanting to now understand in much more detail how changes in temperature and precipitation and extremes are likely to change in the future. Okay. Putting this all together, or one way to put it all together, is to look at insured catastrophic losses in Canada over the last few years. We can see a clear trend, an increase in damages caused by fire, hail, flooding, and heat waves. And this trend is only increasing every year. Okay, so that's the context we live in. Why are we here, and who do we work for? Well, we work for the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, which is a division of Environment and Climate Change Canada, or CCCES, if you will. And our mandate is to make climate science actionable. Okay, so our goal, the CCCES's goal, is to provide Canadians with information and support to consider climate change in their decisions. Okay, we do this in a number of different key ways, through increasing awareness and access to climate data. That's definitely one of the main goals of today's presentation. Providing training and guidance. So that's something that we can do in a more, as a follow-up to this, for example. We engage with users to understand needs. We're going to do a little bit of that hopefully today, but that's something that's much more of that two-way conversation, not just us talking to you, but you talking to us. And we develop new products all the time in a collaborative manner, not just with other climate scientists across Canada, but with folks, again, like you. So we don't work in isolation. We work with a large network of regional partners. That includes the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium out in British Columbia, Climate West, which covers the prairies. We've got Orca in Ontario, Climate Atlantic out east, Uranos in Quebec, and a northern service delivery model that is something that is in development and something we're working towards implementing. And so we all work together to produce data sets and develop these online portals, and in doing so, ensure consistency and knowing that we're using the best available science and the best available expertise across the country. So we often talk about our efforts and our story falling into step 2 of the typical adaptation cycle. So if we think of an adaptation cycle being, a process we undertake together to identify risks, make changes, and develop actions to mitigate those risks, step 2 is typically in the understanding how the climate will change and what that, means for your sector. So, you should know that this is not a process where we come in, we say, oh, here's some climate data, and then you know exactly what to do. No, there's a long process here, one where you are going to be working very hard, perhaps with other partners, perhaps amongst yourselves, to understand how these data are going to lead to climate change impacts and risks and where those vulnerabilities lie, and eventually plans to address those risks. So that's why we are here. And very quickly, why are you here? Well, hopefully you're here to learn. Hopefully you're here to get some exposure to some of these latest data sets and tools. It's all going to be really important, and increasingly so with the work that you do. Uh, However, we also know that it's part of the core competencies for public health in Canada, as was set out by the NCCEH in 2024. So just as a reminder of what those are, we have 1.7, which is demonstrate knowledge of interplanetary crises such as climate change, right? And then, of course, all the effects that it has implications for, including those implications for public health. And 1.8, which is to demonstrate knowledge of the interconnections between people, animals, and their shared environment and ecosystems, and their implications for population health, planetary health, and well-being. And so both of these, I think, very nicely demonstrate, what it is that you need to learn as public health professionals, and hopefully what you're coming to the table with today to find out. Okay, so that's my very quick introduction, and I just want to take even less time to do a short recap of what happened in February. This is by no means a prerequisite for what we're doing today, but myself and my colleague Rachel were here and spoke, I'm sure, to many of you about how, in essence, having climate data isn't the end of the story. And you can sort of see I was already doing that in the introduction. There's a much larger process at play here, and it's up to you to figure out where you fall in this story. Climate data is something that once you have access to, it gives you some power, gives you some agency, but it's certainly not going to magically bust through the various gaps in confidence and training, tools, and funding, all the things that we have to work together as a society to address if we want these data to actually mean something. But we talked a lot about how climate data is used in different contexts. We gave a few case studies and examples of how climate data has been used and misused. And we spoke very briefly about ClimateData.ca, but that was the old version of ClimateData.ca. So since February, we have launched a brand new version of ClimateData.ca. And Elaine is now going to take you through that. So as a reminder, before I pass the microphone on to Elaine, take special note, follow along. If you've got two screens and you can do that, I would highly recommend it. We are going to do this little breakout group session. Please make sure you stick around for it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and unique, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot. But it would be very helpful if you've remembered these little tips, tricks, and various spots on the website that Elaine will mention now. Okay, I'll stop sharing, Elaine, and over to you.
All right, thanks, Ryan. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can all see ClimateData.ca. And I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour, basically, of the website. So for some of you, it will be completely new. For others, you'll be familiar. If you are familiar, as you will notice, as Ryan said, we've done a huge update to the website. We basically outgrew the framework that had been set up when ClimateData.ca launched back in 2019. And so we've had to do a lot of work on the back end to keep the site flexible and efficient so that we can continue to add data sets and different types of data to the site as efficiently as we possibly can. So if you are completely new to ClimateData.ca, I recommend that you just do a quick scroll through on the landing page just to get a flavor of the types of information and data that are available on ClimateData.ca. So you can scroll down. If when you first come to ClimateData.ca, it's not always apparent that there's actually more below, but there is. So you can scroll down and see what's going on. The website's basically divided into data and content. So I'm actually going to start with just a review of the content that we have, and then we'll move into looking at the data. So I'm going to start with our About page. We've done a huge update to this page as well, and you can find a lot of information here about our partners. So all of those regional climate services that Ryan mentioned, we work with them on ClimateData.ca as well. And you can find information about each of those partners and also our computer technology company that we work with to deliver ClimateData.ca CRIM, Centre de Recherche Informatique de Montréal. But if you click on any one of these cards for the regional climate services, it gives you some information about what they do and access to any data and tools that they provide through their own website. So you can, as Ryan mentioned, there's a regional climate service for just about everywhere in Canada. So you can certainly connect with your local climate service if you have questions about climate change or climate information, or simply come to CCCS. We've also expanded our data section. So we now have a lot of information about all of the different data sets that we provide on ClimateData.ca. And we start off with being very transparent about the data. So you can see how, or you can see the process that the data goes through to come onto ClimateData.ca. You can see our data standards that the data needs to conform to be accepted onto ClimateData.ca. So all that to say that the data is very robust. It goes through a rigorous and peer-reviewed process before it's accepted onto the website. And then we have more details about the actual data sets themselves. So our future projection data sets, these are all based on the output of global climate models. In some cases, that output has been downscaled. We've got information about historical data sets. Some we provide directly. The station data sets from ECCC are provided directly. And then there's information about other observed data sets that are used in the development of our downscaled projections. And finally, we've got some details about the methods that are used to downscale our global climate model information so that it's available at scales that are more suitable for decision making. So let's just have a quick look at our default data set. This is CanDCS M6. This simply stands for Canadian Downscale Climate Scenarios Multivariate Data Set for CMIP6. So CMIP6 refers to the latest set of climate model results. So the coupled model intercomparison project phase 6. And multivariate means that the temperature and precipitation information from these models have been downscaled simultaneously. So the temperature and precipitation information is related and consistent. And that means that we can use this data set to calculate other variables and indices. So for example, the humidex data set that we have available was calculated from CanDCS M6. the standardized precipitation evapotranspiration index, our drought index, was also calculated from using the same methodology that DCSM6 used for its development. There's also some further information about this particular data set. So it gives you a summary of how it was produced and also details all of the global climate models that are contained within the data set. I just wanted to show you, as well as the information about the data, we also provide some more details in some cases. So for example, if we look at our drought index, this was developed by our climate research division. And although it's a relatively simple drought index as drought indices go, it's actually quite difficult to interpret. So as well as providing information about the data, we've also got some further details on its interpretation. So there's a piece here that talks about how the index is calculated, and then the numbers that come out of those calculations, how those are interpreted. So there's information in the About page that you may find useful. So if you're looking for something, you can't find it elsewhere on the website, it's always a good idea to have a quick look in the About page as well. And then likewise, you can have a look for the other data sets that we provide. So when you're on ClimateData.ca, if you go back to the main landing page, you can at any time you can simply click on the little ClimateData.ca logo, and it takes you back to the main page. So as well as our About page, our main content is contained within the Learning Zone and the News section. So let's just have a quick look at the Learning Zone. And this provides all sorts of articles, background to climate science, background to the historical data, our future projections. We talk about emissions scenarios. There's all sorts of information in here. And if you were familiar with version 1 of ClimateData.ca, you will remember that we also had the sector modules, so where we looked at the impacts of climate change on specific sectors. Those are also contained within the Learning Zone, and you can easily access any of the particular topic sections by using the menu on the left-hand side. So we can go straight to our information that we have on public health. Each of the sector modules has an overview page which describes how climate change impacts that particular sector. And it also provides some links through to other resources that are useful on ClimateData.ca and also to external websites where there's useful information. So there's an overview page, and then there's also further information. So case studies demonstrating how climate data has been used. So for example, looking at extreme heat wave, looking at how Lyme disease incidence may change in Ontario. The filters are it's a new feature of ClimateData.ca. So this helps you zoom into the information that you want to more quickly than, scrolling right down to the bottom of the page. So we've got a number of different filters for the Learning Zone. You can look at different types of content, or by sector, by region, or even by the technical level of the articles. So for example, if you want to look at that health information, we can simply click on that, and you can further drill down to say, I'm interested in what's going on in Quebec. And then you end up with, in this case, a couple of case studies that meet both of those criteria. So we've added these filters, which makes it much more easy to target the information that you're looking for. So as well as this top menu bar, we've also got one on the left-hand side. So you can use either, whichever one you're most comfortable with. If I now move to the news section, this is the area where we make announcements, and we also have some really neat little blogs that provide high-level information about how climate change may impact things. So for example, we've got the blog that talked about the launch of version 2, so the new ClimateData.ca, and then there's also several articles about how climate data is used, and then understanding different parts of climate. So climate data in action, get climate smart. And again, there's a filter system here. So you can pick on any one of these and go straight to the information that you're looking for. And then finally, in the content section, there's the glossary. I'm not going to open it up. It's simply just, definitions of the technical terms that are used on ClimateData.ca. But I just want to say that it's been updated and expanded for version 2. I will also note that the Learning Zone, we're in the process of actually updating a lot of the articles, particularly some of the earlier ones that were available when ClimateData.ca first launched. We need to do some updating. So you'll see changes to the Learning Zone over the next few months as we do those updates. So now I want to move to the data part of ClimateData.ca. And if you're completely new to ClimateData.ca and you're not quite sure where you want to start, I suggest you start with the variables menu. And this lists all of the variables and climate indices that are available on ClimateData.ca, so you can see the type of information that is there for your use. Again, you can now filter this information either by sector or variable type. You can use both of these filters together. I'm simply going to go straight to the heat-related variables, and you'll see a reduced list of those variables that are relevant to heat. And I'm simply going to pick one of these, days above Tmax. So this is the number of days with maximum temperature above a specific threshold. You get a little description about the data. You get a technical description, so you know exactly what it is. And we've also provided some additional contextual information for the sectors. So one of the feedbacks that we were getting from users was that they were now finding it far more easier to get to the data, but once they got to it, they weren't always 100% sure whether it was the right variable or index for the work that they were doing. So we've provided additional contextual information, which will hopefully help with making that choice. For this particular variable, you can view it on the map or you can download the data. For some of the variables that are listed, they're only available for download. So we'll go straight to the map in this case and have a look at what we can do on the map page. So first of all, I'll just say that as we've already made our choice with the variable we want to look at, this is the one that's shown on the map when we go to the map page. But if you'd come through the map page from the menu options, the default variable that shows is hottest day. And so it may be that you want to look at something different, or you want to look at a different data set. So you can use the data set and variable buttons over here on the left. The data sets are listed, which you can view on the map, so that you may see, oh, something isn't there, and that means it's not available for viewing. I'll leave it with our climate projections. And again, here we have the variable list, which you can also, then zoom in for using the variable or sector options again. So staying with our days with Tmax above a particular threshold, we have our map. Our legend is over on the right-hand side. It's collapsible. We're probably going to change the default setting so that it's open when you come to the map. And then we have some choices to make in the menu on the left-hand side. So you can switch between the latest set of climate model results to an earlier set, CMIP5. If you're starting new work, we strongly recommend that you use the CMIP6 data set. But a lot of work has been done with CMIP5. So we also provide that information so you can, look between the two if necessary. This particular index that we're using has a number of different threshold values associated with it. So you can pick any one of these to display on the map. Here we have our 4 emissions scenarios. So those 4 typical climate futures that we use that Ryan mentioned earlier. And so we can simply select which one we want to view. And you can also compare your selected emission scenario with one of the others that we have available. And this simply is giving you a quick visual comparison function. And then we can also look at that information for the grid boxes, which is the default view, or by census, subdivision, or health region, for example, just bring the map back, and or watersheds. So there's a range of different regional summary options that you have. I'm just going to leave it as the default grid cells. You can change the time frequency of the data. So for this particular index that we're looking at, we have monthly or annual options. So we'll just leave it as annual. And then we have our time slider here to move, see how the projections evolve over time. And you can zoom in on the map to see the grid level structure, and you can pick on any one of these grid cells if you want to go through to the next stage, or if you know your location or the latitude and longitude of your location, you can simply zoom in using the search bar up here. So I'm in Regina, so I've picked Regina, and we get a summary of the projection information for this particular scenario, SSP2 4.5, a moderate scenario, and a summary of our climate model output. So we've got 26 climate models. The midpoint of that output is telling us that at the end of the century, we'll see about 79 days with temperatures, maximum temperatures above 27. This is an increase of 42 days above the baseline period, which is 1971 to 2000. And of our 26 models at the lower end, those models indicate about 67 days with Tmax above 27, and the higher end is showing about 104 days. If we click on See Details, we get to see the time series chart of how the projections evolve over time. So we go from 1950 through to 2100. We've got our 4 different emissions scenarios. You can turn these on or off. I'm just going to zoom in onto our moderate scenario just to explain what you're seeing. So you're seeing the whole model simulation. The gray area is the historical component of the climate model simulation. And for this part of the model run, they've used the actual observed concentrations of greenhouse gases, greenhouse gases and aerosols. And then when we move into the future projection, they're using the emissions information for the SSP2 4.5 emissions scenarios. So rather than putting the results for every single run of the model, so for each of our 26 models, we summarize the information. So our bold line is the median or the midpoint of the climate model results, and the shaded area represents the range. So we've got our 90th percentile value at the top and our 10th percentile value at the bottom. And so there's a couple of models either side of this that lie slightly outside of the range. And you can see as I'm moving my mouse that the values are changing, and you see the median value for each year and then the range for each year. As climate scientists, we tend to prefer to look at 30-year averages. So we're more interested in trends than in the actual annual values. And although the time series chart stays the same, it's the information in the pop-up box now which is changing. So you can see the 30-year period highlighted in sort of the gray box on the chart, and you can see the information change as we move backwards and forwards through time for our 30-year averages. And similarly, we can also look at our 30-year changes. So this is the change with respect to 1971 to 2000. So again, the chart stays the same, but it's the information in the pop-up box which is changing. So also from this chart, you can export the image either as a PDF or a PNG file, and you can also export the data in comma-separated format. So, okay, I'm going to just come out a little bit from here. You also have more control over the map. So we can go up to the map settings, and we have some choices to make here. So our default view is we show you the projections of the actual values coming out of from our downscaled models. You can also look at the changes. So you can see the changes with respect to 1971 to 2000. You can also control the map colors. So you may decide that you want to use a different color palette, for example. You may feel it represents the data more effectively in different colors. So you can pick a different color bar, and you can choose to show it either as a continuous color bar or as a discrete color bar. So you've got specific colors representing categories of data. I'm just going to put it back to the default one here and go back to my absolute values. You can also control the data opacity. So if you want to see some of the landscape features behind the data, sometimes that helps orient yourself a little bit better on the map. You can change the opacity, and you can also do the same, change the opacity of the data labels. If you've been looking at a number of different locations during your session on ClimateData.ca, these are all remembered during the session time, so you can go back at any time to any of the locations that you chose previously. And so when you're on the map, or if you, when you're on the map, every single change that you make is reflected in the URL in the bar at the top here. So if you create a map that you then want to share with colleagues, you simply can click on or copy the URL information and send that to them. They can paste it in their browser and they'll see exactly the same map that you've created. And then at this point, you can also have the download option. So you can download the map that you've created using this button to download the image, or you can download the data itself. And we'll do that to take us to the download section. So as we've already made our selections for our data set and the variable, this is what shows, and it takes us to step 2 of the download process. But I'm actually going to go back to step 1 so you can see it's the process right from the very beginning. So our first step for download is to select a data set, and this whole download section is probably the one that has most changed compared to version 1. So our first step is to select the data set. We've got a number of different observed data sets here that you can download data for. The adjusted and homogenized Canadian climate data set. So this is a data set that's useful for looking at trends. And you can also do some analysis with this data set as well. And then we have our climate normals, so our 30-year average information, and then our station observations. So these are the almost real-time station observations. They're up to date to just to about 2 days before present. And you can get the whole record for any of the ECCC stations. And then we've got our projections, so our downscaled climate projections. Our marine climate projections are separated out because they're on a different grid. So you select a different data set if you're interested in things like sea level change or vertical allowance. And then we've got a couple of data sets that are useful. This one for building design, looking at how design loads change in the future. And then we've got our extreme precipitation data set. So this is intensity, duration, frequency, rainfall data. And this has observed IDF within it, and also future shifted IDF curves that have been calculated based on a temperature scaling method using the temperature projections from the climate models. So we'll stick with our downscale climate projections. We then need to select our variable that we're interested in. And again, here you can filter and just to zoom in to those that you're most interested in quickly, either by type or sector. I'm going to use hottest day in this instance just to demonstrate one of the, or the simplest download process, let's say. So we select our variable, we select our data set version. So again, you have CMIP5 or CMIP6. We'll keep it to CMIP6. We then need to choose a location. So you can either select grid cells or draw a region. You can zoom in to highlight the grid cells, or you can simply go straight to your location of interest. Then click on a box or several boxes. You can select multiple boxes at the same time. Go to the next step. What I want to do with downloading this data is to try and reproduce one of the time series charts. So I'm going to ask for the information at the annual level, but you could also look at the information on a month by month basis too. So I'm going to ask for the annual output, and I want it for all years. So I want to look for the whole time series chart. I don't, in this case, want 30-year averages, but you can also choose the 30-year average option too. So the next step is then to tell ClimateData.ca what format you want the data in. I want to be able to put it into something like Excel. So I'm just going to use CSV, comma separated values. And then this is a simple downscale request. So the data is already ready, and you simply click on it to get the zip file containing the information that you've requested. We can go back to any one of these steps if we want to change one of our choices. So I'm going to go back now and pick a different variable, and I'm going to pick one of the heat related variables, and I'm going to pick one of the heat wave indices that we have available. So heat wave frequency. So for this particular index, we need to provide some information to ClimateData.ca so it knows how to do the calculation. And it wants some information about a minimum temperature threshold and a maximum temperature threshold, and then also the number of consecutive days that we want to define the heat wave. So you may already know thresholds that are relevant to your location, but if you don't know thresholds, one of the possible sources of information is to use the heat warning criteria map that the Meteorological Service of Canada has developed. And you can find thresholds that are relevant to heat impacts on health on this map. So I'm in Regina, so I'm in the pink area, so section 9, and I can see that my maximum temperature threshold is greater than or equal to 32. My minimum temperature threshold is greater than or equal to 16. And for a heat warning criteria or heat warning to be issued, those conditions need to exist for at least 2 days. So let's go back to our download page. We seem to have lost where we were, unfortunately. So I'm just going to go straight back to the main page, download. We'll go through this really quick and mute the frequency. And then we put our thresholds in. So if we look at the information about the threshold, this tells us that its values greater than the threshold. So I want 16 to be included for my threshold value. So I'm going to put in 15.99. And similarly for maximum temperature, I'm going to put 31.99 in because I want 32 to be included. And I'm going to set the minimum number of consecutive days to 2. Our next step is to select the location on the map that we want to do the calculation for. And at this point, you can also, if you wanted to do the calculation for a health region or a census subdivision, you have those options. I'm going to stick with the grid cells. I'm going to go straight to my location, pick a grid box, and then go to the next step. Now we have some choices to make to provide some extra information for the analysis. So I want to do the analysis over the complete time period available from the models. So I just need to adjust my screen to get it to show me the whole menu. So I'm going to go from 1950 to 2100. I want to have all the models in the ensemble. I want all emissions scenarios. We just get a little warning here that we have slightly fewer models for SSP 3 7.0. So if we select all of them, it will only calculate it will only do the analysis for the 24 models that are common to all 4 emissions scenarios. So if you want to make sure you use all 26 for the others, you need to do those separately and then do SSP 370 by itself. But I'm happy to just use a common set of 24 models. I want to use the default percentiles that we use on ClimateData.ca, so the 10th, 50th, and 90th. If you're interested in looking at the output from each of the models, don't click any of these percentiles and you'll get the values for each individual model. I want to summarize the information though, so I'm picking the percentiles. I want to get the data output on a year by year basis, so I just pick annual. And then I tell ClimateData.ca that I want the data in CSV format. I don't need to have any decimal places because I'm looking at the number of events, so I don't want a fraction here, so I leave decimal places as 0. And then I simply enter my email address, enter the characters here, and send a request. And for requests like this, if the server isn't busy, it would take probably 10 to 20 minutes to process the data and send it back to you. And the sort of thing that you can do with the information when you get it back, this is a typical output from an analysis like this. And you can graph this in a very similar way. So you can import it into Excel, or if you know some coding, you could use R or Python to create a time series chart similar to what you see on ClimateData.ca. So this is what I've done here for the heat wave frequency information that we've requested from the website. So with heat waves, the other interesting thing to look at is, well, how do they change during the year? Are we going to see them earlier and later in the year? So I can go back in my download request and say, actually, now I want to look at the monthly values and get output for each month. And again, you fill in the information, send your request. This is asking for a little bit more processing, so it may take slightly longer. But then again, when you get the information back, you can, you'll be seeing something similar to this. So now you've got your year and the months in here and all of the scenarios and our 3 percentiles that we've requested. And you can draw something like a heat map, and you can do this in Excel. I've used R again to just do this processing. And this helps you see how the incidence of heat waves changes during the year. So we've got our complete timeline along the bottom. So 1950 on the left, 2100 on the right. And then you can go through the months of the year and see how the incidence of heat waves changes. So this is our midpoint of our moderate scenario, so the 50th percentile. So you can see main months, July and August, but we do see some events as early as May. And then as we're looking at heat waves, maybe we want to look at those warmer models in the ensemble. So we can look at the 90th percentile values and plot a similar heat map. And now you can see, more occurrence in May, and even some of these heat wave events occurring as late in the season as October. So it's helps you do analysis, and it's providing a little bit more information than you can get directly on the map or the time series chart at the moment. So that's basically the download page. I just want to finish off quickly just by drawing attention to a couple of other things that we have available on the website. We have our apps section, which we've got 2 applications available at the moment. One is the Fire Weather Projections app, where you can look at how the weather conditions that are suitable for forest fires changes over time. So this can, from this you can infer information about whether or not we could expect to see more poor air quality days in the future. We also have our spatial analogs tool. So this is quite a neat tool if you're interested in looking at maybe what adaptation options are out there for our future climate conditions. And what the tool does is it identifies a location somewhere in North America that currently has the same climate, which is similar to the one that's projected for our location in the future. And so you can specify what you want that climate to be. So you could, for example, be concentrating on some heat-related variables, and then the tool will identify current locations which have a heat climate similar to the projected climate for the future. And so by going and looking at the information that's available for those sites, you can maybe get ideas or see, you know, some of the impacts of extreme heat and ideas for adaptation actions that could be maybe be implemented to improve the resilience of your location in the future. So most of the site so far is focused on those longer term projections that are useful for adaptation planning. We are moving into more short-term planning information. So this is our seasonal to decadal section. So this is under development at the moment, and we're hoping to launch the first set of seasonal forecasts early next year. But we're getting ready for those data, and we've started providing guidance information. So if you're interested in the seasonal forecasts, there are already some learning zone articles there and some links through to other locations where you can find information about seasonal forecasts and understand how they can be used and applied. So if you're involved in emergency planning, emergency preparedness, the seasonal to decadal forecast section of the website is probably something that you will be interested in moving forward. And then finally, I just wanted to draw attention to the support button. If you have any questions about ClimateData.ca, any questions about climate change or climate data or climate information, you can use the support button and it will take you some question or query, and it actually gets routed through to the CCCS's support desk. So that's basically it, ClimateData.ca, a bit of a whirlwind tour. I hope you found it useful.